Whether reason will prevail depends only partly upon us. We must hope and strive for the best. We must prepare for the worst.
Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. Well, I think one of the things that Washington and Beijing both agree upon is that the trajectory of the U.S.-China relationship is heading downward. And it has been for some time. This is not a new development or a news flash. Where they differ is on the diagnosis of the problem. I think from Beijing's perspective, they view the United States as acting like an anxious declining power, seeking to cling to its privileged position and pushing China down in the process. And from Washington's perspective, I think that the view is much more that China is acting aggressively abroad and repressively at home. And with the Trump administration, I think there's an added layer to this, which is I think President Trump's diagnosis is that China has been ripping off the United States for a long time, and it's necessary and overdue for the United States to sort of level the playing field. And so both of these parties are coming at the problems in the relationship from a very different vantage. And depending upon which vantage you choose, it leads you in different policy directions. So from China's perspective, they don't expect the United States and China to reach some harmonious partnership anytime soon. They think the United States is going to be very determined to try to slow its rise. And so from their perspective, the solution to that problem is to amass power and influence to a level at which the United States has no alternative other than to accommodate and accept China as a major leading central global power. And I think from the American perspective, the approach is just different. It's that the United States under President Trump is going to use a combination of personal charm, but also find sources of leverage to try to chip away at some of the imbalances and unfairness in the relationship. The challenge that I see going forward for the relationship is that President Xi and President Trump potentially are just arriving at different places. President Trump believes that he is going to be entering into a negotiation with the Chinese to address some of these problems in the relationship and revise the terms of the relationship. My sense from being in Beijing recently and talking with other Chinese counterparts is that they just simply do not trust or wish to showcase a partnership between the United States and China. And so that's sort of the structural tension at the heart of the relationship, and I think one of the obstacles that we'll face going forward. I think that the only way to understand China is by being able to hold different sort of thoughts in tension at the same time, right? Because you can tell a story, two stories at the same time. The first story that you can tell is one of, demographic decline, economic slowdown, state-owned enterprises sort of eating up the capital needed to go to the private sector, a slumping property market, which accounts for, close to a quarter of China's economy. There are, by any objective standard, a lot of really bad problems on the balance sheet of China. And at the same time, they are absolutely ripping in many of the leading edge technologies of the future. And, whether it's solar, batteries, clean energy, drones, nuclear, some of the military hardware that is being developed and was on display recently in China's military parade, electric vehicles, AI. China's leading companies are doing extraordinarily well. And so I think that both things are happening simultaneously. I would say that 50% of the Chinese economy is pretty bad. 5 to 10% of it is extraordinarily strong, globally strong. And those two things happen alongside each other. And then on the political front, Graham, my view is that China's model has never been one that I have seen value in emulating. It's a pretty idiosyncratic Leninist top-down model. And when you have a strong leader who has a vision and is able to sort of marshal resources in the direction of a strategic goal, China can move with alacrity and speed. But when China sort of moves off track, it sometimes has difficulty correcting course. And that's where I think the United States has a bit of an advantage. We make mistakes daily as a country. We're off track fairly often, but we tend to have a pretty good record, at least over the past 70 to 100 years, of correcting course when we get off track too far. And so we have a little bit more adaptability in our system, and a little more flexibility that I think allows us to avoid some of the potholes that Beijing occasionally runs into. My own view of this is that the Biden administration got a lot of things right and a few things they came up short on. But let me just start out by accepting the premise of your point, which is that developing countries see a lot of value in having close and closening relations with China. I think that we should all acknowledge and accept that. In the Biden administration's record, I would say a few things. First, on what they got right. I think if you look at where they ended compared to where they began, America's alliance relationships in Asia and abroad were stronger than they were when they arrived in office. The gap in economic size of the United States compared to China was wider when the Biden administration left office than when it entered. In other words, America's economy grew faster than China's economy during the 4 years that the Biden administration was in office. They climbed out of a pretty deep COVID hole and sort of served as an arsenal of vaccines for many parts of the world and delivered a need to people in the region that China couldn't match. So I think that they deserve, credit for that as well. And I think that the convening power of the United States around global challenges was strengthened during the 4 years that the Biden administration was in office. But would I give the Biden administration an A+ in its approach to China? No. And I've written publicly and spoken publicly about this. But I think that one of the challenges is that the Biden administration never developed a narrative to explain what it was that the United States was trying to do with China. What was the purpose, the animating goal, the direction? How would we measure success? How do we know if we're on the right track? What are the benchmarks that we would use? Reviewing the 4 years of the Biden administration, you would have difficulty finding any evidence to sort of fill in that space. The other challenge I thought was that the Biden administration really prioritized politics over policy. And when you do that, you end up sort of whipsawing with public opinion and biasing towards always trying to project toughness and strength, because that's what I think many people perceive to be popular. Americans like to be reminded of our strength on the world stage. But sometimes wise strategy requires doing things that aren't popular in the immediate term. And so I think that sometimes that led them astray. And, to your final point, I don't necessarily fault the Biden administration for the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine. I wish that would never have happened. And maybe you can make a counterfactual argument that if the United States under Biden had been stronger and tougher, that Putin would have been deterred. But they were dealt a pretty tough hand with October 7th, with the invasion in Ukraine. And as we were discussing a moment ago, I think that took some of the wind out of the air of our efforts to reprioritize and focus more on Asia and China specifically. Well, I do certainly feel like America's retrenchment or retreat from global leadership is creating a vacuum. And I think that China is doing a fairly good job of filling parts of that vacuum. I'm not sure that it is we're at a terminal stage where everything is final and it's going to be frozen in time from this point forward. So I remain optimistic that there is capacity for course correction in the United States going forward. But if we took a snapshot of today and looked at the world, I think that it would be hard to challenge the notion that China is gaining ground and influence and an ability to impose its will in parts of the world that the United States values and sees as strategically significant. My own view is that America has sort of three big strengths that we control and that China does not. One is our domestic dynamism, our ability to attract the very best and brightest people and the biggest, boldest ideas, these world-changing industries that get incubated in the United States. We control that. China does not. The second is our alliance network. I am still of the view that our alliances are a force multiplier of American strength and influence on the world stage, and that we sort of let them perish at our own peril. And then the third is our ability to sort of bring the world together or bring a mass of countries with capacity together to tackle big, hard global challenges that no one country can tackle on its own. That's something that traditionally the United States has been uniquely good at doing when we have sort of focused our mind on it. And unfortunately, I see us sort of atrophying on all three of those areas of sort of foundational strength of the United States in the current moment. And, I remain hopeful that we will regain our footing going forward. But the current picture is, I think you were alluding to, Graham, is one that is troubling. So I will share my perspective, acknowledging that it is not the settled view of the China watching community. My view is that China wants to be acknowledged and respected as a central leading global power on the world stage. It does not want to be trifled with. It wants others to respect its interpretation of its territorial integrity and sovereignty, which includes, from Beijing's perspective, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Xinjiang, Tibet. They want their political system to be respected, their economic model to be acknowledged as a leading economic model. And I think that they want to benefit from the shadow of the future. And I think that they believe that the more that they move towards those goals, the more prestige the China will enjoy, and the more sort of authority within China the Chinese Communist Party will have. And so, there are a range of views. Some people think that the only goal of the Chinese leadership is to preserve the power of the Chinese Communist Party. That's one end of the spectrum. Others at the far end of the spectrum believe that the goal is to sort of topple the United States, displace the United States, and impose their vision and values upon the world. And we will all live within a Chinese world. I guess I fall somewhere in the middle of those two poles by saying that China wants to be acknowledged and accepted as a global power that has to be consulted on every major global issue that comes to the fore.